The cabin lights glowed dimly, but Marcus Johnson's nerves were already fraying. He was a man used to commanding boardrooms and negotiating contracts worth millions, yet at 30,000 feet, his 2-year-old daughter Zoe was dismantling every shred of composure he had. She cried with the full force of a storm, tiny fists beating against his chest, her cheeks streaked with tears. Marcus had tried everything: bottles, toys, silly songs. Nothing worked. His perfectly tailored suit, his first-class seat, even his platinum status on the airline meant nothing now. The air in the cabin thickened with stares. At first it was just glances, but soon came the whispers. "Typical," muttered a man 2 rows behind his voice, dripping with disdain. "You'd think someone like him would know how to control his kid." A woman across the aisle sighed loudly. "Some people buy first class, but still don't belong here." Her words weren't only about the crying child. Marcus had heard that tone too many times before. He knew exactly what she meant. The comments pressed against his chest heavier than Zoe's small body. He kissed the top of her curls, whispering, "Daddy's got you, baby girl." But his voice trembled, betraying the exhaustion he kept buried under the image of control. From Economy. Amelia Carter had tried to bury herself in a worn paperback, but the crying pulled at her nerves. She wasn't the type to interfere. A shy librarian from a small town, she had built her life around quiet corners and silent rooms. Yet something about that child's sobs struck her differently. They weren't just cries, they were a plea. And then she heard the passengers' comments. The sting of prejudice was impossible to miss. She had seen it in books, in news stories, and occasionally in the sideways glances she herself received when struggling to make rent in neighborhoods where people assumed poverty meant failure. But here on this plane, the weight of judgment aimed at a father and child felt unbearable. Amelia closed her book. Her hands shook as she stood, her heart hammering. She took one step toward the curtain that divided economy from first class. It felt like crossing a border into another world. She drew a deep breath and stepped through. Marcus barely noticed her approach, too focused on keeping Zoe from wriggling out of his arms. When a soft voice said, "Excuse me, may I try to help?" He looked up, startled. A young woman stood before him, clutching her book like a shield. Her hair fell loose around a pale face, flushed with nerves. Marcus frowned. "I've tried everything. She won't let anyone near her. Sometimes it works better with a stranger," Amelia offered. "May I try singing to her?" For a moment suspicion flickered in his eyes. He had been judged too many times to trust easily. Yet something in her expression, gentle, uncertain, but determined, made him nod. Amelia crouched to Zoe's level, careful not to reach too quickly. She hummed a melody soft and low, a tune her grandmother once sang in the evenings. The sound threaded through the cabin like a quiet spell. Zoe's sobs slowed. Her hiccuping breaths softened into little sighs. Her heavy eyes blinked at Amelia, then closed, as her head rested on Amelia's shoulder. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt sacred. Marcus exhaled, stunned. "What did you do?" he whispered. "A lullaby," Amelia said, almost apologetic. "Just a trick my grandmother taught me." For the first time that night, Marcus smiled an unguarded, weary smile. "You're an angel disguised as a passenger." Amelia shook her head quickly, handing Zoe back with care. "Just hold her gently. She trusts your arms now." When she returned to economy, her heart pounded as if she had done something outrageous. But in her chest bloomed a warmth she couldn't explain. On the other side of the curtain, Marcus held his daughter close, the weight of prejudice and exhaustion momentarily eased by the kindness of a stranger. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple lullaby had set in motion a story that would test every assumption, every fear, and every barrier built by a divided world. Chicago's spring air carried the scent of rain-soaked concrete and new beginnings. Amelia Carter clutched a folder of resumes to her chest as she hurried through the polished corridors of the Lincoln Community Center. Today was her chance, the long-awaited interview for coordinator of the new children's library section. After months of rejection emails, this felt like a door creaking open. "You've got this," she whispered, adjusting her thrift store blazer for the 3rd time. She rounded a corner and collided headlong into a stroller. Papers flew like startled birds, scattering across the marble floor. Amelia gasped, dropping to her knees. I'm so sorry I wasn't watching where—" her words froze. The man kneeling opposite her was the same one from the plane, Marcus Johnson, the father with weary eyes and a crying daughter who had clung to Amelia's lullaby. "You!" she blurted, stunned. Marcus's brows lifted in equal disbelief. "You!" Between them, Zoe sat in her stroller, clapping her little hands as if applauding a private joke. Amelia scrambled to gather her resumes, cheeks burning. Marcus reached for a crumpled sheet and handed it back, revealing a faint smile that softened the hard edges of his suit. Only then did she notice the faint carrot stain smeared across his shoulder, a human detail that contrasted with his aura of power. "What are you doing here?" she asked, still crouched on the floor. "I could ask you the same," Marcus said. "I'm meeting with project candidates." "Candidates?" Amelia blinked. "You mean for the library coordinator position?" Marcus's silence was confirmation enough. Her stomach dropped. He wasn't just another parent in the hallway. He was the benefactor, the man with the power to shape her future. "Relax," Marcus said gently, noticing the panic in her eyes. "I'm not here to judge resumes. That's Mrs. Patterson's job. I'm only reviewing the final recommendations." Before Amelia could respond, Zoe stretched her arms toward her. "Mama." The child babbled a sound halfway between syllables and longing. Amelia froze, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "She remembers you," Marcus said, quietly, almost in awe. Heat rushed to Amelia's cheeks. She carefully let Zoe grasp her finger, heart racing at the small, undeniable connection. For one fragile moment, she forgot about interviews and resumes and reputations. There was just a tired father, a bright-eyed child, and a woman who had once crossed a curtain on a plane. But the spell broke when a sharp voice cut through the hallway. "Mr. Johnson." A woman in her 50s, tablet in hand, approached briskly. "Mrs. Patterson, head of the center's hiring committee." Her eyes flicked from Amelia's scattered papers to Zoe clutching Amelia's finger. The judgment in her gaze was swift, cold, and familiar, the kind Marcus knew too well, the kind Amelia had read about, but never felt so directly. "Miss Carter, your interview will be rescheduled," Mrs. Patterson said curtly. "There's a maintenance issue in the conference room." Amelia's chest tightened. Rescheduled. More waiting. More uncertainty. Marcus straightened his presence, suddenly sharper, his voice smooth but edged. "Mrs. Patterson, I think a little flexibility could—" "With all due respect—" "Mr. Johnson," the woman interrupted, "we'll proceed as planned. Thursday, 10 a.m. She tapped her tablet, then swept away without another glance. Silence lingered in the hallway. Amelia bent to collect her last resume, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry about that," Marcus said softly. "She can be rigid. It's fine." Amelia lied, though. Disappointment burned her throat. Marcus hesitated, then asked, "Since your day just got disrupted, can I buy you a coffee?" "As a thank you, for the plane." Amelia looked at him, startled. Coffee with a millionaire, with a man whose presence seemed to carry both admiration and suspicion everywhere he went. Her instinct screamed to retreat, but Zoe's tiny hand still held her finger as if casting the deciding vote. "All right," Amelia said at last, her voice steadier than she felt. As they walked side by side down the hall, Marcus pushing the stroller and Amelia clutching her worn folder, neither could shake the feeling that fate was pulling them into a story much larger than themselves. One where every glance carried history, every choice risked judgment, and every connection might be a rebellion against the barriers of the world outside. The cafe near the community center was small, tucked between a dry cleaner and a corner bakery. Its mismatched chairs and faint smell of roasted beans gave it the kind of comfort Amelia Carter always sought in unfamiliar cities. Marcus Johnson, however, seemed out of place. His tailored suit, gleaming watch, and the aura of quiet authority turned heads even before Zoe babbled loudly from her stroller. A few patrons glanced over, some smiling politely, others with thinly veiled judgment. Amelia caught the look from a middle-aged man at the counter who muttered under his breath, "Money doesn't buy manners." The words weren't about Zoe's cheerful noise. They carried the same insinuation Marcus had lived with his whole life. Marcus ignored it, but Amelia noticed the slight tightening of his jaw. When the server came, Amelia ordered plain tea, while Marcus asked for a cappuccino. Zoe banged her plastic cup against the table with glee. "You didn't have to do this," Amelia said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Coffee, I mean. You don't owe me anything." "You calmed my daughter at 30,000 feet," Marcus replied. "Trust me, I owe you more than coffee." He smiled, a real one, and Amelia was startled by how warm it made him look. They chatted awkwardly at first. Books, travel. Amelia admitted she hadn't left Texas often. Marcus mentioned deals in London and Tokyo, but skipped over the luxury, sensing it might sound like boasting. For a moment, the gulf between their worlds stretched wide and unbridgeable. Then Zoe reached for Amelia's hand again, as if stitching the distance closed. Marcus leaned back, studying Amelia with a thoughtful gaze. "I need to ask you something unusual." Her heart skipped. "Unusual how my nanny quit last week. Zoe and I have been improvising." He gestured at the stroller, at the tired rings under his eyes. "I can't keep up. Not with board meetings, investors, and a toddler who refuses to sleep unless she trusts the person holding her." Amelia blinked. "You're asking me to stay with Zoe?" "Just for 2 weeks," Marcus said quickly, as though sensing her retreat. "You'd live at my house. Separate quarters, of course. I'll pay fairly. More than fairly. It's temporary until I find the right long-term solution." The words stunned her. She had come to Chicago desperate for a stable job, not a bizarre arrangement with a millionaire. She pictured her mother's face if she knew, "You're moving into a black man's mansion with his child. People will talk." And they would. Society always talked. Amelia's voice came out thin. "Why me?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Because Zoe trusts you. That doesn't happen often. And—" his eyes softened. "You didn't look at me like everyone else on that plane." The truth lodged in her throat. She had noticed the stares, the whispers, the quiet blade of racism cutting through first class. She had felt it like static in the air, and she had hated it. Still, she hesitated. "I have the library interview." "It's 2 weeks," Marcus said. "By the time you start, this arrangement will be over. Think of it as a bridge. You need a place. I need help. Zoe needs peace." Zoe punctuated his plea by squealing and smearing applesauce on her tray, as if endorsing the idea. Amelia laughed despite herself. "She does make a strong argument." Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, I know how this might look. People will talk. They always do. But I'm asking you to see past that. Help me. Help her." Silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of espresso machines and murmurs of other patrons. Amelia stared at her teacup, weighing survival against pride, caution, against possibility. Finally, she nodded slowly. 2 weeks, that's all." Relief washed over Marcus's face. 2 weeks, he agreed. And in that small cafe with the city buzzing beyond its fogged windows, 2 people from different worlds made a pact. Neither realized how quickly those 2 weeks would change everything they thought they knew about family, about trust, and about the invisible lines society drew to keep them apart. The mansion rose from the leafy Chicago suburb like a fortress of glass and steel. Amelia Carter stood at the iron gates, clutching her 2 suitcases, staring at a place that looked more like a magazine cover than a home. Perfect lawn fountain at the entrance windows so tall they seemed to watch her back. Marcus opened the door before she rang the bell. "Welcome to organized chaos," he said with a dry smile, lifting one of her bags. Behind him, Zoe squealed from the marble foyer, waving a spoon as if greeting royalty. Inside the house was breathtaking vaulted ceilings, polished wood floors, modern art gleaming beneath chandelier light. But the perfection was intimidating, like walking into a museum where she didn't belong. Amelia glanced at her scuffed shoes, suddenly aware of every worn edge on her thrift store blazer. Marcus led her upstairs to a wing with its own bedroom-bathroom and even a small study. "This is yours, privacy guaranteed." Amelia murmured thanks, though unease gnawed at her. She had never lived in such luxury, yet she could already feel the invisible weight of judgment. If her family saw this, if her neighbors back home found out, what story would they invent about the white librarian who moved into a black millionaire's mansion? At dinner, the awkwardness thickened. Amelia tried to set the table only to knock over a glass of water that splashed across the marble. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. Marcus bent to clean it, but Zoe seized the chance to catapult mashed potatoes across his tailored shirt. The sight of an Italian silk tie dripping with food broke Amelia's nerves into laughter. She pressed napkins against the mess, giggling, until tears welled. Marcus glanced at her, then at his daughter, clapping as though she'd staged a comedy act. Slowly his lips curved into a laugh, genuine, deep, and disarming. For the first time, the mansion felt less like a museum and more like a home, yet not everyone welcomed her. The next morning, as Amelia carried Zoe down the hall, she overheard two members of the household staff whispering near the kitchen. Another nanny once scoffed, "But this one's different. Different, how white. And staying in the master's house. People will talk." Their words sliced sharper than they intended. Amelia paused, clutching Zoe tighter. She wasn't naive, she knew her presence here was unusual. But the undertones stung not just gossip, but the suggestion that her race made the arrangement scandalous, dangerous, unnatural. Marcus entered moments later, oblivious, kissing Zoe's cheek before heading to his office. Amelia forced a smile, but inside unease spread like cracks in glass. That night, as Zoe curled against her shoulder, Amelia whispered, "They don't know us. They don't know you. That's all that matters." But in the silence that followed, she wondered if 2 weeks would be long enough to prove them wrong, or if the world outside these glass walls would never let them forget where they stood. Marcus Johnson's office in downtown Chicago glittered with glass walls and chrome fixtures, but the atmosphere inside was anything but polished. Papers spread across the conference table screens, flashing with graphs and numbers that shifted like storm clouds. His assistant, a young man in a slate-gray suit, handed him the latest report. "The board is concerned," he said carefully. "Concerned," Marcus snapped. "We delivered growth 3 quarters in a row. What exactly are they concerned about?" The assistant hesitated, then lowered his voice. "They think your personal situation might be distracting you." Marcus's jaw clenched. He knew what that meant. Not just being a single father, not just losing his wife in childbirth. It was the undertone he had faced since his first venture capital pitch. A black man at the helm is a risk. A black man with a crying toddler. A liability. He waved the assistant away, his voice cold. "Tell them results speak louder than gossip." But the words echoed hollow. Results hadn't silenced the whispers before, and they wouldn't now. Back at the mansion that evening, Amelia noticed the strain etched deeper on his face. She had been stacking Zoe's blocks into uneven towers when Marcus walked in, tie loose and shoulders sagging. "Rough day," she asked gently. "You could say that." He dropped into the armchair, running a hand over his head. "Investors act like I'm running a circus instead of a company. They talk about diversity in their press releases, but behind closed doors." He trailed off bitterness, sharpening his tone. "They're just waiting for me to slip." Amelia sat across from him, her voice tentative. "Maybe they're threatened. You're succeeding in spaces they never expected you to." Marcus looked at her, surprised by the steadiness in her eyes. For a moment, the heaviness on his chest eased. But then his phone buzzed again, another message, another demand, and the pressure returned full force. Later that night, Amelia overheard 2 executives' voices drifting from the speakerphone in Marcus's study. "We need someone more stable at the top," one said. "Optics matter. Right now, Johnson looks distracted." Another chuckled. "I heard he even brought a white nanny into his home. How's that going to play with the community?" Amelia froze outside the door, her stomach twisting. They weren't just scrutinizing Marcus's business, they were dissecting his life, their lives as if love and care were corporate liabilities. She wanted to storm in to shout that Zoe wasn't a distraction, that kindness wasn't weakness, but instead she slipped back down the hall, clutching the railing as though it might hold her together. When Marcus emerged hours later, she was still awake, reading in the kitchen with Zoe asleep in the nursery. He paused, studying her weary posture, the book unopened in her lap. "You heard, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Amelia met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes." Marcus exhaled a sound heavy with years of unspoken battles. "This is what it's like. Every step forward they move the finish line. And still, I can't let it break me." For the first time, Amelia saw not just the successful businessman, but the man fighting on two fronts against a ruthless market and against a world that questioned his right to stand where he stood. And though she didn't say it out loud, she knew then that the real test wasn't Marcus's ability to run a company. It was his ability to keep being a father, a leader, and a man under a gaze that never forgave the color of his skin. The weekend brought gray skies and an unexpected visitor. Amelia Carter had barely finished making Zoe's oatmeal when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find her mother and older brother standing on the marble porch, their expressions a mix of worry and judgment. "Amelia," her mother gasped, taking in the towering glass house. "You didn't tell us you were living here." Her brother crossed his arms. With him, the word carried more weight than its 3 letters deserved. Amelia stiffened. "Marcus is Zoe's father. I'm helping out until what?" her mother cut in. Eyes sharp. "Until people decide you've abandoned your own community, until they whisper you're chasing a rich man's money." Heat rose in Amelia's cheeks. She had prepared herself for gossip from strangers, not the sting of her own family's suspicion. Marcus appeared in the foyer. Zoe balanced on his hip, her curls bouncing as she babbled happily. "Good morning," he said evenly, extending a hand. "You must be Amelia's family." Neither shook it. Her brother's gaze lingered, appraising Marcus with a guarded hostility. "You're the CEO everyone talks about. I've read things, about the deals you cut, about how you play the system." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "People read what they want to believe." Amelia stepped forward. "Enough. He asked me to help with Zoe, and I said yes. That's all." Her mother shook her head. "That's never all, Amelia. This world won't be kind to a relationship like this. To you." The words landed heavy. Amelia wanted to shout that she wasn't naive, that she knew the risk of judgment on both sides. But standing there, caught between her family's disapproval and Marcus's silent endurance, she felt small like a child again. Later, after her family had left with stiff goodbyes, Amelia sat in the nursery rocking Zoe. The child's small hands clutched her necklace, eyes heavy with sleep. "I'm not ashamed of being here," Amelia whispered, "but they'll never understand." Behind her, Marcus leaned against the doorframe. His face was unreadable, but his voice was low. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, not even them." Amelia looked up, her throat tight. "They think I'm betraying my roots. And your world. They'll say I don't belong either. Where does that leave us?" Marcus stepped closer, his shadow falling across the crib. "It leaves us in the middle, and sometimes the middle is the hardest place to stand." Zoe stirred, sighing softly in her sleep. Amelia kissed her curls, feeling the weight of invisible lines drawn by generations before them. Lines she and Marcus were already crossing, whether the world approved or not. The storm rolled in at dusk, thunder rattling the glass walls of the mansion like a warning drum. Rain streaked the windows, the world outside dissolving into gray. Amelia Carter tucked Zoe into bed, humming softly, as lightning flashed across the sky. But something was wrong. Zoe's cheeks were flushed, her skin hot under Amelia's palm. The toddler whimpered a sound more fragile than her usual cries. "Marcus." Amelia called, worry tightening her chest. He entered quickly, still in his work clothes, phone pressed to his ear. One look at Zoe and his professional mask cracked. "She's burning up." Amelia nodded, already reaching for the thermometer. The numbers blinked too high. She gave the child fever medicine, but Zoe's small body trembled, her eyes glassy with discomfort. Marcus ended his call abruptly. "I have to stay," Amelia interrupted. "She needs calm, not chaos." But Marcus was already pacing his hands, restless. "I should call a doctor. Or maybe the hospital." Amelia caught his arm. "Listen, she's scared. If we panic, she'll panic. Let me hold her." Marcus hesitated, torn between instinct and fear. Then he nodded, stepping aside. Amelia lifted Zoe and walked the room slowly, rocking her against her chest. She hummed the same lullaby from the plane, low and steady. The storm outside clashed with the rhythm of her song, but gradually Zoe's cries softened into tired whimpers. Marcus sank into a chair, watching as if the sight of his daughter calming in another woman's arms was both miracle and defeat. "How do you do that?" he whispered. Amelia smiled faintly, though her eyes stayed on the child. "It's not about tricks. It's about trust. She knows she's safe. Hours crawled by. The storm raged and Zoe drifted in and out of feverish sleep. Marcus checked the clock a dozen times, his anxiety vibrating through the room. At one point he murmured, "I can't lose her." "Not her too." Amelia glanced at him, startled by the rawness in his voice. She wanted to ask about the two, but didn't. Instead, she whispered, "She's not going anywhere. Not tonight." By dawn, Zoe's fever finally broke. Her breaths came steady, her forehead cool against Amelia's shoulder. Amelia laid her gently in the crib, tucking the blanket close. Exhausted, she turned to find Marcus still in the chair, head bowed, eyes red from sleeplessness. When he looked up, gratitude shone in his gaze, mixed with something unspoken. "Thank you," he said hoarsely, "for staying calm when I couldn't." Amelia shook her head. "Any parent would panic. You're not alone anymore. Remember that." The words hung in the quiet nursery, heavier than the storm that had passed. Marcus nodded slowly, as if testing the weight of trust placed in him and in her. The morning after the storm, the sky cleared into a crisp Chicago blue. Amelia suggested something simple. "Let's take Zoe to the park. She needs sunshine." Marcus hesitated. A park? His world revolved around conference rooms, private lounges, and chauffeured cars. Parks meant unpredictability, scraped knees, public eyes. But Amelia's steady look disarmed him. An hour later, they were spreading a blanket under a wide oak in Millennium Park. Zoe toddled in the grass, her yellow dress catching the sunlight like a burst of joy. At first, Marcus hovered close, tense at every stumble. But soon Zoe laughed as she slid down the playground slide, her curls wild with static. The sound tugged at something inside him, loosening a knot he hadn't realized was permanent. He even let Amelia coax him into pushing Zoe on the swing. Her squeals of delight echoed louder than the city traffic. For a brief moment it felt like family. But then came the stairs. Two women on a nearby bench whispered behind sunglasses. A man with a business paper glanced at Marcus, then at Amelia, his disapproval sharp as glass. Amelia caught fragments. "Odd couple gold digger, not right." The words weren't new to Marcus, but with Amelia beside him, they cut deeper. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tight. Amelia noticed. She bent toward him, her voice low. "Ignore them. They don't know us." "That's the problem," Marcus murmured. "They don't want to know us. They just want the story that fits their prejudice." Later, when Zoe smeared ice cream across her cheeks instead of eating it, Marcus surprised himself by laughing. A full, unrestrained laugh. Amelia joined in, snapping a picture with her phone. In the frozen moment, Zoe's sticky smile, Marcus's laughter, and Amelia's grin glowed brighter than the weight of anyone's judgment. Back at the house, Amelia uploaded the photo to the library's community page, an innocent post about Family Day at the park. By evening, it had dozens of comments, some sweet, but others cruel. "Interesting choice of company. She's clearly using him. Another example of selling out." Amelia scrolled through, her chest tightening. Marcus entered, reading over her shoulder. His face darkened at the ugliness on the screen. "You see," he said quietly, "no matter what we do, it's never enough." Amelia turned off the phone, her hand brushing his. Maybe it's not about being enough for them. Maybe it's about being enough for her. She glanced at Zoe, who slept peacefully on the couch, a smear of dried ice cream still on her cheek. Marcus studied Amelia for a long moment, then nodded. For her. And though the world outside sharpened its knives of judgment inside the house that night, the sound of Zoe's breathing was louder than prejudice, steadier than fear. The following week, Marcus Johnson decided to try again. He needed structure, reliability, someone who could stand between his chaotic schedule and his daughter's fragile peace. Her name was Miss Clara. She arrived at the mansion in a navy suit, posture, straight smile tight. Every movement radiated efficiency. She carried a leather folder bulging with references and a list of developmental benchmarks for toddlers. Amelia Carter stood nearby as introductions were made. Zoe clung to her leg, eyeing the stranger warily. "Hello, Zoe," Miss Clara said, in a sing-song voice that sounded rehearsed. I'll be your new nanny. Zoe buried her face deeper into Amelia's skirt. It's normal, Clara said smoothly. Children resist change. With proper discipline, she'll adapt. Amelia frowned. Something in Clara's tone felt clinical, more like a laboratory observation than affection. For the first hour, Clara demonstrated her methods organizing toys by color, enforcing snack times with military precision, and jotting notes as if Zoe were a case study. Amelia watched uneasily while Marcus observed from his office doorway, trying to convince himself this was what stability looked like. But Zoe wasn't convinced. She refused the carrot sticks Clara offered, turned her face away from picture books read in a flat voice, and whimpered whenever Amelia stepped out of sight. By late afternoon, Clara announced, "We'll conduct a separation trial." She lifted Zoe from the playmat, ignoring the child's twisting protests. "Miss Carter, please leave the room. Mr. Johnson, it's important we establish independence." Amelia hesitated. Marcus gave a small nod. Reluctantly, Amelia stepped into the hall. The cries began instantly, loud, panicked, raw. Amelia pressed a hand against the wall, every instinct telling her to run back. But she forced herself to wait, teeth clenched against the sound of Zoe's sobs. 15 minutes passed. The wails didn't soften. Amelia could stand no more. She burst back into the room. Zoe stretched out her arms desperately, her face, red eyes swollen. Amelia scooped her up, murmuring comfort, rocking her until the sobs subsided. Miss Clara checked her stopwatch calmly. "This regression is predictable. We'll repeat the exercise tomorrow." Amelia stared at her, incredulous. "She's not an experiment. She's a child." Clara pursed her lips. "Boundaries are necessary. Overindulgence creates manipulative behavior." The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus stepped forward, his voice low and sharp. "You're dismissed." Clara blinked. "Mr. Johnson, I think you're making an emotional." "I said leave." Marcus repeated, anger vibrating beneath his control. Clara gathered her things, her heels clicking against the marble. When the door closed behind her, the silence was broken only by Zoe's sniffles. Marcus turned to Amelia. "I thought I needed professional order. But she doesn't need order, she needs love." Amelia held Zoe closer, her own voice unsteady. "Love isn't weakness. It's what saves us from all the noise out there." For once, Marcus didn't argue. He simply reached out, brushing Zoe's curls with a tenderness that carried the weight of surrender. 2 days later, Amelia Carter decided to surprise Marcus. She dressed Zoe in a pink dress dotted with tiny daisies and rode the elevator to the 32nd floor of Johnson Dynamics. The skyscraper's glass walls reflected the Chicago skyline, a monument to power and scrutiny. Inside, Marcus's staff greeted Zoe with smiles, charmed by the toddler's bright laugh. Marcus himself emerged from a meeting, his face lighting up at the sight of his daughter. For a blissful hour, the three of them shared his office, Zoe stacking blocks on the mahogany desk, while Marcus and Amelia traded gentle jokes that felt far from corporate coldness. But as Amelia waited for the elevator to leave, voices drifted from the corridor. 2 executives, sharp suits and sharper tongues, unaware she was listening. "So that's the new one asked. Cute but ordinary." The other laughed softly. "You know Marcus. He cycles through women on his payroll. Marketing consultant, HR associate. Remember those? He gets close, then he's done. Always temporary." Amelia froze. Heat pricked her skin. "Think this librarian will last?" "Please. Give it 2 months." The elevator doors slid open with a cheerful ding, but Amelia barely stepped inside. Their words echoed in her head louder than Zoe's chatter, heavier than the city skyline pressing against the glass. That night, back at the mansion, Marcus cooked a simple pasta dinner. Zoe giggled in her high chair, delighted by noodles sticking to her fingers. Marcus looked more relaxed than Amelia had ever seen him, but Amelia barely tasted her food. The executives' voices played over and over, cycles through women, always temporary. Marcus noticed her silence. "You're quiet tonight," he said, concern flickering in his tone. "I'm fine," she murmured, stabbing at her plate. He leaned closer. "No, you're not. Tell me." She lifted her gaze, torn between trust and fear. The man across from her had carried his daughter through storms, had trusted her with his most vulnerable moments. Yet the shadow of doubt fed by gossip and history pressed hard. Maybe, she whispered, maybe this isn't what I thought it was. The words stunned him. Marcus set down his fork slowly, his expression unreadable. What do you mean? Amelia's voice shook. Maybe I should leave. The silence that followed was brutal. Zoe babbled happily, unaware that her world had just tilted. Marcus's eyes darkened, pain flashing beneath his control. If that's what you want, he said at last, each word precise, measured. I won't stop you. He stood gathering dishes with deliberate calm while Amelia sat frozen, her chest tight with regret. The executive's whispers had carved deeper than she had realized. And for the first time since stepping onto that airplane weeks ago, Amelia wondered if she had just broken something too fragile to repair. The mansion felt different after Amelia's words. Quiet, heavy, as if every polished surface reflected back her doubt. She packed slowly that night, folding her few clothes into a suitcase. Zoe stood in the doorway, thumb in her mouth, watching with wide, confused eyes. Mama, the little girl whispered, her voice small. Amelia's chest cracked. She knelt, brushing Zoe's curls back. I'm not your mama, sweetheart. Her voice trembled. But I love you all the same. Zoe clung to her neck, refusing to let go until Marcus appeared. He carried his daughter away gently, though his eyes never met Amelia's. The next morning, Amelia found a note on the kitchen counter in Marcus's bold handwriting. Take all the time you need. You'll always have a place here for her and for you. Her throat tightened. She slipped the note into her pocket, then left suitcase rolling across marble that suddenly sounded like thunder. Days blurred into gray. Amelia moved into a cramped studio on the south side, its peeling paint a stark contrast to Marcus's glass fortress. At night, she replayed the gossip, the judgmental stares, her family's disapproval. They had all convinced her that what she and Marcus shared was impossible, but the emptiness in her chest told another story. One evening, as rain tapped against her small window, Amelia opened a book from her suitcase. Tucked between its pages was a photo Marcus had given her, Zoe covered in ice cream at the park, Marcus laughing freely beside her. On the back, his handwriting read, "The day you made us a family." Tears blurred the words. She realized she had let fear of what others whispered, steal something real. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Marcus worked late into the night, drowning in contracts and silence. He tried to convince himself he had done the right thing letting her go. But every time Zoe asked Mama, his chest tightened. He had built a fortress against the world's prejudice, but Amelia's absence proved the walls protected nothing. For Zoe, the nights grew restless. She woke crying, arms reaching for someone no longer there. Marcus tried to soothe her, but even his voice couldn't replace the lullabies Amelia once sang. On the seventh night, as thunder rolled once more across Chicago, Marcus whispered to the sleeping child in his arms, "I thought I could protect us by letting her go, but maybe I just let fear win." Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the truth he could no longer deny. He didn't need control. He needed her. And somewhere across the city, Amelia stared at the photo pressed against her heart, realizing the same thing. The library was quiet that afternoon, rows of books humming with the silence Amelia once found comforting. Now the hush felt oppressive. She was sorting a stack of children's picture books when the librarian on duty handed her a sealed envelope. "This was dropped off for you," the woman said. The handwriting on the front stopped Amelia cold. Bold, deliberate strokes she knew by heart. Marcus. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. "Amelia." The letter began, "I don't know why you left. Maybe I failed to make you feel safe. Maybe I let the world's noise get louder than my own voice. But before you close this door for good, I need you to know the truth." Her eyes blurred, but she forced herself to read. "I fell in love with the way you make Zoe laugh. I fell in love with the calm you bring into rooms where I can barely breathe. You walked through a curtain on a plane and changed everything. Not because you tried to, but because you cared. That is what I never expected. That is what I cannot forget. If you still believe this was temporary, I won't stop you. But if even a part of you feels what I feel, then don't let other people's voices decide our story. Come back. Not for me. For us." Signed simply, Marcus. The letter slipped from her hands onto the desk. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she pulled from her bag the photo she'd kept hidden, the one from the park Zoe sticky with ice cream. Marcus mid-laugh herself, caught grinning like she belonged in that moment. On the back, his handwriting, "The day you made us a family." The tears came hard, because she remembered the warmth of Zoe's tiny hands in hers, because she remembered Marcus's laughter breaking through his armor, because she remembered how it felt to stand beside them as though the world's walls didn't matter. For the first time, Amelia admitted the truth aloud, her voice cracking in the empty library. "I love them." She gathered the letter and photo, shoving them close to her chest. Her doubts, the gossip, her family's warnings, the stares still clawed at her, but they no longer felt like reasons to run. They felt like the very battles worth fighting. Amelia left the library in a rush, rain misting across her face as she stepped into the Chicago streets. For days, she had let fear dictate her choices. Now, with Marcus's words echoing in her heart, she knew she had only one choice left: to go back. Marcus Johnson's sister lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Milwaukee, far from the glass towers and sharp eyes of Chicago. The modest brick house with its front porch and flower boxes looked nothing like the world Marcus had built. Maybe that was why he had chosen it as a refuge. Amelia's bus pulled up just after noon. Her stomach twisted as she stepped onto the sidewalk, clutching a small suitcase in one hand and Marcus's letter in the other. She almost turned back twice during the ride. But then she heard Zoe's voice in her memory, the sweet, uncertain mama that had torn through her defenses. That single word carried her forward. She climbed the steps slowly. Before she could knock, the screen door opened. Zoe came barreling out, curls bouncing arms wide. "Mama!" she cried. Amelia dropped her suitcase and fell to her knees, gathering the little girl into her arms. Tears blurred her vision as Zoe buried her face in her neck, giggling with pure delight. When she looked up, Marcus was standing in the doorway. His expression was guarded relief and longing mixed with hesitation, as though afraid this moment was a mirage. "Amelia," he said softly. She rose, still holding Zoe. Her voice shook. "I'm sorry. For leaving. For doubting." I let their words drown out what I knew in my heart. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes fixed on her. "And what did your heart know? That this," she glanced at Zoe, then back at him, "is real. You, her, us. I love you both." The guardedness in his face crumbled. He closed the distance in 2 strides, wrapping his arms around them. The 3 of them held each other on that porch, Zoe squealing happily between them, as if sealing the reunion herself. When they finally stepped inside, the air smelled of fresh bread and lavender. Marcus's sister Danielle watched from the kitchen doorway with a knowing smile. "Took you long enough," she teased. Amelia flushed, but Marcus squeezed her hand. "She came back," he said, as though nothing else mattered. Later, when Zoe napped upstairs, Marcus and Amelia sat on the porch swing. The afternoon sun cast golden stripes through the slats. For the first time in weeks, Marcus's shoulders eased, his laughter unforced. "You know what scared me most," he admitted. "Not the board, not the gossip. Losing you. Because if I lost you, Zoe would lose the only person besides me she truly trusts." Amelia reached for his hand. "Then let's stop letting fear make our choices. We've both been running from shadows, yours of control, mine of doubt. Let's choose differently this time." Marcus nodded his thumb, brushing over her knuckles. "Together, then, no matter what they say." In the quiet that followed, Amelia realized something simple but profound. The middle ground they occupied, the space between prejudice, gossip, and expectation, wasn't a weakness. It was where love proved its strength. The wedding was nothing like the grand spectacles Marcus Johnson's business associates might have expected. No hotel ballrooms, no chandeliers dripping with crystal. Instead, the ceremony took place in the garden behind his Chicago mansion, beneath the wide branches of an oak tree that had stood for a century. White chairs lined the lawn in neat rows. Simple lanterns hung from branches, their glass catching the late afternoon sun. Flowers, daisies, lilies, wild roses were arranged by Amelia herself, each bloom carefully chosen not for luxury but for meaning. Guests arrived in uneven clusters. On one side, Amelia's family, their faces still marked by uncertainty, but softened now by curiosity. On the other, Marcus's closest friends and a handful of colleagues who had stood by him through storms of scrutiny. Danielle, his sister, moved between groups with ease, bridging conversations that might have faltered. When Amelia stepped into the garden in a modest white dress, whispers rippled. Some saw scandal, others saw beauty. Amelia heard them all, but kept her gaze steady on Marcus. He waited beneath the oak Zoe by his side, in a flower girl dress, clutching a pillow with the rings. The toddler's curls bounced as she toddled forward, pausing halfway to wave at the crowd. Laughter rolled through the garden, breaking the tension like sunlight through clouds. The officiant's words faded as Amelia and Marcus faced each other. Neither needed a script. The vows they spoke came raw from the heart. Amelia Marcus said, his voice thick, "You walked into my life when the world was loud with judgment. You silenced it with a song. You reminded me that being a father isn't about control but love. And today I promise you both, my daughter and you, that I will never let fear write our story again." Amelia's throat ached as she answered, "Marcus, you showed me that love isn't about avoiding pain or hiding from prejudice. It's about standing in the middle of it, unafraid. You and Zoe became my family before I even realized it. And today I choose you, both of you, not just against the world, but with the world watching." As they exchanged rings, Amelia's mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Her brother shifted uncomfortably, but his gaze softened when Zoe clapped her tiny hands and declared family loud enough for everyone to hear. The kiss was simple, tender, but when Marcus pulled Amelia into his arms and Zoe squeezed between them, laughter and applause burst across the garden. For a moment, the whispers stopped, replaced by something stronger. The reception was a collage of imperfection. Amelia's uncle sang off-key. Zoe smeared cake across her dress. Marcus burned his attempt at grilling skewers for guests. Yet each mishap felt like proof this wasn't a performance for acceptance. It was a celebration of survival, defiance, and love. As lanterns glowed in the dusk and music drifted through the warm air, Marcus leaned close to Amelia, his hand on hers. "Look around," he whispered. "This is us. Messy, judged, imperfect, and unstoppable." Amelia smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. For the first time she felt no need to explain, no need to defend. The garden, the vows, the mingling of families, this was their promise to love louder than the world's prejudice, and to raise Zoe in a home where every boundary could be crossed by compassion. Months later, the Johnson house sounded different. The echo of silence had been replaced by laughter footsteps and the sing-song voice of a toddler who had learned to string words together. Zoe darted through the hallway in tiny sneakers, a paintbrush clutched in her hand, shouting, "Mama, look! Amelia!" Carter knelt by a canvas spread across the floor of the family room. Bright smears of yellow and blue streaked the paper, Zoe's version of a sunrise. "Beautiful," Amelia whispered, pressing a kiss to her daughter's curls. The child squealed, dabbing another streak of paint onto her mother's sleeve. From the kitchen doorway, Marcus Johnson leaned against the frame, arms crossed, smiling. "She's inherited your creativity, or your determination," Amelia teased, holding up her paint-stained hands. Life had changed since the wedding. Amelia now ran a multicultural reading program at the library, inviting children from every neighborhood, Black, white, Latino, Asian, to sit in circles and hear stories in many voices. The project was funded by a community grant Marcus insisted on endowing under Zoe's name. The program drew attention, sometimes supportive, sometimes hostile. A few parents protested, sneering at the sight of children reading books about families who didn't look like theirs. But Amelia stood her ground, Marcus at her side. Together, they insisted that stories belonged to everyone. Zoe, oblivious to the battles around her, thrived. She made friends across every background, her innocence dissolving barriers adults still clung to. Watching her share crayons with another child in class, Amelia realized Zoe was living proof of what love could dismantle. Of course, prejudice hadn't vanished. Marcus still felt the sting of whispers at board meetings. Amelia still caught the occasional glare from strangers who couldn't accept what they represented. But now they faced it together. One evening, the three of them sat on the porch swing as twilight bled across the sky. Zoe balanced on Marcus's lap, clutching a picture book. Amelia leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion softened by contentment. "You ever think about the plane?" Marcus asked quietly. Amelia smiled. "All the time. One curtain, one choice, and everything changed." Marcus kissed the top of Zoe's head. "Back then I thought survival meant control. Turns out survival meant letting someone in. And I thought safety meant staying small," Amelia added. "Turns out safety meant choosing to stand in the middle of the storm." Zoe interrupted with a squeal, holding up the book. "Family story." Marcus opened it, his deep voice weaving through the pages. Amelia listened, her hand entwined with his, as their daughter giggled at the pictures. The house around them no longer felt like a fortress of glass. It felt like home, a house of many colors shaped not by wealth or reputation, but by the courage to love past fear. The world outside might never stop whispering, but inside those walls, love spoke louder.